Good day to everyone joining us on the Zoom platform, and welcome to Shifting to Sustainable Healthy Diets, a dialogue ahead of the Global World Food Systems Summit conceptualized by the UWI STA Faculty of Food and Agriculture and the FAN project, exploring the roles of the food system actors, community perspectives, and the demand for healthy, local, and sustainable food products and services from across the region. Colleagues, we are here because the region is facing a serious public health food-related issue. The Caribbean Public Health Agency warned of obesity levels in CARICOM countries, that they are highest compared to the rest of the world, and alarmingly very high among our youth, which puts them at particular risk for non-communicable diseases. My name is Dr. Sidoxi, Deputy Dean, Outreach and Internationalization from the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, moderator for today's session. The objectives of this particular webinar are to focus on solutions considering public health and the importance of healthy diets and nutrition to overall health and wellness compounded by COVID-19, to understand the prerequisites to solutions to overcome known difficulties in transitioning from unhealthy to healthy foods, to identify the role currently played by private sector actors in producing, distributing, and marketing local healthy foods, and to showcase healthy, local, and sustainable food products and services from across the region. Just before we get into our main elements, just tell you a little bit about our logistics for the session today. So participants, please note that you will be restricted in your communication through the use of the chat and Q&A icons that are to the bottom of your Zoom screen. For general comments, we ask that you please use the chat function, while questions to the panel should be directed through the Q&A icon, and that particular window. We have a dedicated period towards the end of the session to respond to all your questions, comments, and concerns. So please, you are encouraged to be very, very interactive. We have an inclusive roster of panelists that I know will keep you engaged throughout this entire program. Just prior to our technical presentations, we will be honored by having some opening remarks from our host institution. The first item on our agenda, I would like to invite Professor Wayne Ganpat, Dean of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, to offer some opening remarks. Professor Ganpat, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Dr. Sidoxi, Deputy Dean, Outreach in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, Professor Alafia Samuels. I acknowledge you, as well as the other speakers, Mr. David Neilands, Mr. Jody White, Dr. Madhuvanti, and our own colleague, Dr. Listra Fletcher. I welcome you on behalf of the campus principal and on behalf of the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, which is charged with the responsibility for food and nutrition of initiatives across the region. The issue here today is very important and very important to us. We are the regions facing serious public health related issue. In March this year, the Caribbean Public Health Agency warned that obesity levels in the Caribbean, in the CARICOM countries moreover, are the highest compared to the rest of the world, and alarmingly higher in children 5 to 9 years old. Overweight and obesity prevalence level in children has been found to be 2 to 3 times higher than the world average, which puts them at risk for non-communicable diseases. We know the burden that puts on the health system presently and the burden it will put on the health system in the future. Only today, in the Trinidad Guardian, I read someone commenting and said that 240 adults, 100,000 adults in the Caribbean died due to impacts of poor eating habits. That's an alarming statistic. I think it was coming out from the FAO representative in Jamaica. So as we celebrate 100 years of agricultural research here at the campus, it is important for us to address this issue. We are named a faculty of food and agriculture. I have always articulated that probably nutrition should have been added, especially in the last decade, should have been added because it has been high on the agenda. So it's something I leave the faculty with, that they need to put nutrition much higher in its name because it's so very important. And as we celebrate 100 years of agriculture at the University of the West Indies here in Trinidad and Tobago, this year, 2021, 100 years, after being established here at the Western Agricultural College in 1921, we are pleased to see that we have transitioned from agriculture alone to including agriculture and food in all our programs. And we really want to extend this knowledge and expertise across the region. And the other things that the faculty are doing is that we are training people, nutritionists, technicians, person in the food service industry, to enter what we are calling the age of nutrition. And Trinidad and Tobago is not our only captive audience. We want to extend this to the entire region. So most of our programs, some are already online and some will be going online in the very near future so that we can extend this knowledge across the region. We also have the MSc in Value Addition, which is titled MSc in Value Addition for Food and Nutrition Security. And it's one of my programs that I spearheaded and was named exactly that, so that we would seek some measure of nutrition, put some emphasis on nutrition in those programs so that graduates can diversify their products, extend shelf life, etc., for more seasonable crops. Just give us a better chance, a better fighting chance with more local input. And one other objective of the faculty initiative really is that several PhD students are interrogating the issue of digitalization of agriculture, and it's expected that they will provide strategies to really enhance nutrition education across the region. So today, this webinar brings a unique group of researchers, civil society representatives, private sector, and youth activists to focus on the role of the private sector and the community's perspectives and the demand for healthy, local, and sustainable food products and services from across the region. I urge you to get involved in the conversation and to generate solutions. The quality of lives in our people in the region depends on the actions we take now. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so very much, Dean Ganpat, for sharing with us these opening remarks. And we just want to note your emphasis on the burden to our health system, as well as information indicating high death rates associated with NCDs. I also wish to acknowledge your input into the proactive approach taken by the FFA to support transitioning and capacity development in this critical area. Kudos to the FFA. Let us move on to our technical presentations for our engagement this afternoon. And it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Professor Alafia Samuels. And Professor Samuels, a former director of the George Allen Chronic Disease Research Center, UWI Barbados, is now with the Caribbean Institute for Health Research, UWI, in Jamaica. She's a medical doctor trained at UWI Mona. She also holds a master's in public health and a PhD in chronic disease epidemiology from Johns Hopkins University. Her career has included both working with the Ministry of Health in Jamaica, delivering and managing public sector health programs for greater than 20 years, and in academia at the University of the West Indies for the last 10. She's a member of the PAHO Technical Advisory Group for NCDs for the Caribbean, technical advisor to the Healthy Caribbean Coalition, chair-elect of the NCD Child, co-chair of World Obesity Federation Policy and Prevention Committee, and a Lancet One Health Commissioner. Her research interests include policy, practice, and evaluation of NCD prevention and control programs, and translating evidence into practice. She has more than 50 publications in peer-reviewed journals. She led the formal evaluation of the CARICOM Heads of Government 2007 Port of Spain Declaration on NCDs and reports annually on NCDs to the Caucus of Ministers of Health of 20 Caribbean countries. A 2016 Lancet profile dubbed her the fast food watchdog of the Caribbean. It is with great pleasure I welcome our first presenter, Professor Alafia Samuels, to share with us her presentation on private sector partners to improve healthy eating. Professor Samuels, the floor is yours. If you just unmute your mic, please, Professor.
Mute. Yes, thank you. I was being obedient to mute. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And today we want to talk about healthy eating and as a lead into the role of the private sector in. So just to give an idea of our consumption in the Caribbean compared to the rest of the world. So on the left-hand side, you will see consumption by age group. So along the x-axis is the ages, and on the y-axis is the amount of calories. So on average, the world is consuming much less calories than the Caribbean, and the colors indicate the different types of food. And I just want us to focus on the red bar, which is sugar-sweetened beverages. And we can see that in our children at age 10, we have the highest consumption. And in fact, it's off the charts, as they would say. Sorry. It was mentioned earlier about childhood obesity. This was a study done for the Commonwealth Health Ministers meeting, where we looked at Commonwealth countries. And in regards to small island developing states, only the Pacific Islands are at a higher trajectory than the Caribbean. So the Caribbean is there in blue, and you can see the very rapid increase in childhood obesity over the past decades, where we were, around 2%, and we are now about 12%. And there's a great link between food systems and high burden of NCDs. And here you see the Caribbean and the Pacific in terms of the rapid increase in food imports over the last decades. The Caribbean is thought to be one of the regions of the world with the highest levels of consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, estimated at 2 per day. And of course, this results in life in the fat lane. This is an 11-year-old who weighs 190 pounds and clearly is obese. And the danger of obesity is not just aesthetic or children being bullied or whatever. We also have impact on disease. So you can see here BMI category by hypertension. So for the obese, they have double the likelihood of hypertension as those who are normal weight. And for those people who have diabetes, the obese have 3 times the rate of those who are normal weight. The result is that we find that our main risks for death and disability, and this is a Jamaica figure, but it's similar for the rest of the Caribbean, where our main risks are diet related. So our main risk for death and disability, number 1 is diabetes, which is being driven in large part by obesity and sugar-sweetened beverages. 2 is high body mass index obesity. 3 is dietary risk. 4, high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is driven again by obesity and high salt intake. And please note that these risks have increased by 45% over the past 10 years. So we can say that unhealthy diet is a leading modifiable cause of NCD disease and premature mortality in the Caribbean, where we have a much higher percentage of our NCD deaths. In fact, 40% of our NCD deaths take place before the age of 70. Now, the relationship with the private sector is very important because the private sector feeds people, academics do not. And we also need to consider that it's important for us to transition to a diet that's sustainable for the planet. So with our 2 big objectives, and this diagram is from the Lancet Eat Commission, And they conclude that food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability. So we need to do both things at the same time. The problem is that we have been transitioning to processed foods. And processed foods, we look at the red bar at the bottom. Ultra processed foods are our big problem. All the things that the young people are eating, the chips, the burgers, the hot dog, the cake and pastry, the sugar sweetened beverages, most breakfast cereals. We should be eating more in the green category, unprocessed and minimally processed, and a little bit of the yellow, of course, your oils that you need. And then some processed foods, actually preserved foods is a better word for that, because yes, we need to preserve food, but the ultra processing, you can't even recognize what's in the food. There are words on that label that you can't pronounce. And my thing is, if I can't pronounce the word, I shouldn't be eating it. So we have about 10 companies that control a great deal of the packaged foods in the world. And a lot of the products that they have right now are ultra processed and have unhealthy foods, trans fats, and so on. But there is a global movement. And I think this year's conference, the United Nations Food Conference later on, will have to address this issue of the quality of foods from multinational corporations. But today we're going to be talking about what has been happening in the Caribbean and what advances have been made. So our two private sector speakers later on will talk to us about what we have been doing. So what we need to do is to have partnerships with the private sector, and we need to be reformulating. We need warning labels and nutrition labels, and these warning labels should be graphic front of package labels, because it is the most equitable approach to labeling, where everybody, regardless of their educational level, can easily see which foods are, have high rates of sugar, salts, and fats. But also we need to recognize that there is what we call the friendly private sector. Private sector making profits from selling healthy foods, and our last presenter will tell us how he's doing that. And so on. So we need to be very, we need to recognize that the private sector, there's a whole range of players in the private sector. Okay, so what should we drink? First and foremost, water. Very good for you, cheap, comes right to the pipe. In the Caribbean, we're lucky that we have water coming out of our pipe that is suitable for drinking. So remember, when you buy the bottled water, that the bottle is part of the environmental problem. So reusable bottles, please. So this is advice on the best drinks for you. So water, unsweetened tea and coffee, low-fat milk, diet drinks. Of course, we have our coconut water that we need to put right in that mix as well. The worst thing for you to be drinking is sugar-sweetened beverages, because they give you lots of calories and nothing else. And sugar in drinks is much more dangerous than sugar in food. Okay, so what should we eat? Half vegetables, quarter starch, quarter good protein. Here's a nice meal ready for everybody to have. We also have other things in the Caribbean. This is more Jamaican style jerk chicken. And then we have our steamed fish with, you know, your vegetables and your boiled yam. Wonderful food to eat. Okay, the profitable and friendly private sector. We have a whole range of interventions from a whole set of different private sector companies across the region. Innovations that they have made in order to produce and market foods that are more healthy and less harmful. So here we have some photographs of some various initiatives. In Jamaica, we have a company called Island Grill that does a lot of jerked and grilled foods. And the nutritionists in Jamaica recommend to their clients, those who must eat on the road, that Island Grill is much preferable to like Kentucky or, you know, deep fat fried other places. What should we drink? Again, we have our green juice, our beet juice. You have all those kind of natural drinks. And we have also had reformulation exercises. And a good example has been the reduction of salt in bread in Barbados. And there you can see some of the products that they have been able to reduce the salt in. And there is the package. Oh, the cassava bread, of course, is a whole nother innovation as well, because cassava is our own from in the Caribbean. So here are the views and the pictures of these wonderful children, Caribbean children, growing up that we are obliged, really. We have signed the Declaration on the Rights of the Child. And in part of that, it mandates governments to have environments, healthy environments for children. And healthy environments mean environments where they have access to healthy food, and that we do not have marketing and sale of unhealthy ultra-processed foods, either in schools or in their environments. And of course, we have to encourage their parents at home to also reflect some of this healthy eating. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor Samuels, for framing the context of this particular engagement and highlighting to us, the high consumption of processed foods and how that links to an obesity burden and the likelihood of NCDs. And very importantly, there I pulled out early death. So thanks for drawing that very strong relationship here, and for also sharing with us insights into the role of the private sector as well as consumers and the relationships that have to happen there with things like appropriate labels. I was also very happy to recognize regional innovations in healthy foods, and I hope that that stimulates our participants and attendees in regards to their own perspectives. So I just want to remind them, please note that the chat and Q&A functions are available, and we encourage you, if you do have any questions or comments, to use those features to sharing them with our panel. So as we move on, I will now like to invite Dr. Madhuvanti Murphy, otherwise known as Maddie. Dr. Murphy is a senior lecturer in qualitative research methods at the George Allen Chronic Disease Research Center of the Caribbean Institute for Health Research, and the Deputy Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies at the Faculty of Medical Sciences, University of the West Indies, Cave Hill campus in Barbados. Maddie's area of expertise is in the use of qualitative research methods, including in-depth interviews, focus groups, and photo elicitation. Her research and publications over the last 15 years have focused on social and behavioral determinants of health, public health policy development, implementation, and evaluation in small island developing states, and also food and nutrition security intervention research throughout CARICOM. She has advised on a range of public health issues at both national and regional levels. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Murphy to do a presentation on understanding consumer food consumption in the Caribbean. Dr. Murphy, please.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you. I'm really happy to be able to share some of this research and the findings that we have from one of our grants to understand consumer food consumption in the Caribbean. So just a little background in terms of what we know about food insecurity, nutrition, and NCDs in the Caribbean. We know that mortality from NCDs are the highest in the Americas, with 4 out of 10 NCD deaths under the age of 70, and those are potentially preventable. We also know that hunger and nutritional deficits coexist. And with the increase in population overweight and obesity, that's been leading to some of the issues that we have, especially with NCDs. We have a global food system that's demanding more processed foods and processed meals. And we've had changes in our dietary patterns over the decades. We have a nutritional landscape that's fueled by junk food, with the fastest increase in ultra-processed food and drink product sales and in overweight and obesity being in Latin America and the Caribbean. So what we did with one of our grants is we looked at we investigated the factors influencing consumer food sources and dietary patterns. And we did a range of focus groups, interviews. We spoke with consumers, farmers, manufacturers, really from top to bottom, bottom to top, people in the food system, really to understand and to see if everyone was saying the same kinds of things, the same kinds of stories, but from different perspectives. And we did these in Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I should add. So what did we find out? A lot of people said, I know better, but. So the knowledge exists about healthy versus unhealthy foods. People spoke a lot about saying, yes, we know about NCDs, we know what happens to our bodies, but consumer demand drives what's available for purchase. And accessibility is important, but affordability is the bottom line. And what we found from what everyone has been telling us is that cost and convenience override knowledge. We had, for example, one mother who was explaining that she had 2 young kids. And while she knew about healthy foods, she knew about NCDs, all of these things, the reality for her is that she works 2 jobs. She has to get food home to her kids. And sometimes the cheap Chinese noodles are the fastest things to get that can fill tummies. And, she said she actually feels guilty about it. So people know, and they're really trying to figure out what to do, but they're going for the cheapest option, given all the different things that are happening with us in our lifestyles right now. Children nowadays don't eat them things. This was something we heard quite a lot from parents in particular. The exposure to local produce is a thing of the past, they think, and children eat what they know, and what they know is the imported fruits and vegetables. That's what they see when they go to the supermarket with their parents, for example. So we have to consider the accessibility and marketing to children as well, because that plays a very big role in what they eat. It's what they're seeing on ads, it's what they're seeing when they go out to places, it's what they're seeing that's being offered at restaurants. And the foods introduced in schools, because a lot of parents, for example, spoke about school feeding programs, school meal programs that offer some local, farmers to school, bringing vegetables in and having those cooked, for example. But the issue is if you don't have that follow through at home with children, they lose interest in eating them. So it can't be something that's just given in one setting. And then we have the invincibility of youth. Young adults consider themselves protected from NCDs due to their youth. They figure that they will change their diets when it becomes necessary to do so. If they have a risk factor, then they will consider that. Young people with spending power seek to balance health and wellness, with healthy eating being one aspect of health. And I found that really interesting when we spoke to some of the younger adults. One young man, for example, said that, if it's a choice between a stressful day and during a stressful day, having to buy a meal that was healthy versus going to maybe the movies with some friends to kind of de-stress, he saw it as, his mental health was more important at the time than worrying about what to eat. And he will faster go do that than buy the healthy meal. So, trying to balance holistic health, trying to figure out what makes the most sense to do in a particular situation. Food is not always the top priority. And interestingly, families rarely eat together. So Sunday lunches are the exception. Individual family members, including children, eat on the run. And dinner may be all from the same meal, whether it's prepared at home or whether it's store-bought and brought home, but everyone is eating at their convenience. And we're seeing the loss of that communal eating, which sometimes stands in as a check for what you're eating as well. Fast food is no longer a treat, and I ask, but should it ever have been? As a treat now means that more fast foods, and when I say fast foods, I don't only mean the big chains, I also mean what we call convenience foods. A lot of these roadside vendors who are selling hot food, and those are being consumed in larger quantities, particularly on weekends. Those who work in areas that we consider town areas purchase their fast food now more as the norm. And those fast foods or convenient foods are popular for persons with long commuting times to work or school. They eat en route. Interestingly, we heard about the early enforcement of eating healthy foods leading to rebellion. And we found this quite, something that we hadn't really considered as much. This perception of being forced to eat fruits and vegetables as children led to adults eating them less now, because now they have a choice. So many adults would not force their own children to eat items that they didn't want to eat based on their own past childhood experiences. So the psychological piece of eating and how food is seen, how healthy food is seen, is really important in terms of how we get messaging across around healthy and nutritious foods, because we don't want people to feel that they're being forced to eat something that they don't want to eat. And then the question kept coming up, is eating local healthier? We've been pushing a lot about eating local, but there were some concerns about things such as pesticides and other chemicals on food that's grown and produced locally. Are farmers, using the right amounts? Are they trained enough? What about buying local convenience foods? Are they seen as better? And even if they're seen as better, but how are they really prepared? Are they really prepared in a healthier way? And then how are meals portioned? Professor Samuel showed a great place in terms of how it should be portioned, but we all know sometimes when you get that container of food from a fast food place, it isn't always portioned that way. So these were some of the things and concerns that consumers had in particular. So what do we need to do? We really need to create consumer demand for nutritious options. We have to engage convenience food providers to prepare nutritious options that are appropriately portioned. We have to consider making the cost of local unprocessed foods competitive with that of imported foods. And we have to really be mindful of our messaging and marketing healthy, nutritious foods, including them being a part of a holistic approach so that people feel that all aspects of wellness are being considered. We also have to consider when we talk about childhood obesity in particular and look at interventions for children, that interventions around increasing childhood consumption of healthy local produce should have a heavy emphasis on exposing children to healthy local produce in as many settings as possible, along with enough information to allow them to start making healthy choices from a young age. So thank you very much. I encourage you to eat local, but eat healthy. And I would like to thank our research partners throughout UE and the Ministries of Health and Education and Agriculture in St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Jamaica. And this work was carried out with the aid of a grant from the IDRC in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Murphy, for sharing with us some consumer perspectives on diets. And notably in the Caribbean, we recognize some constraints in terms of affordability, accessibility, and marketing. We also recognize, particularly at the youth level, perspectives on their feeling of invincibility. And I noted some key issues as well, the role of family meals and probably how we have lost that over the generations. I also noted a very important comment here on whether or not, in comparison, while we push for local, can we guarantee that local is healthy? And I think that has to come out as part of our overall discussion. Most importantly, though, I think I want to chime your phrase here that cost and convenience seems to override knowledge, and is a very important consideration, I think, for all of us here and going forward pertaining to our own food systems, how we address that very, very key issue of ensuring that healthy foods are affordable to our most marginalized. So once again, thank you so very much, Dr. Murphy, for sharing with us. And I'm sure there will be lots of questions in regards to your presentation. Now we want to move on to one of two of our private stakeholders who are going to share with us some of their perspectives and insights. First of all, we have Mr. David Neilands. Mr. Neilands is a former British Foreign Service officer and advertising executive. He joined Supercenter Limited as a marketing manager in 1985. He became the driving force for many enterprising initiatives, including the conceptualization of the long-running Run for Your Money TV program. He was appointed marketing director of the company in 1993 and managing director in 2001, a post he held until his retirement in 2013. He has served on a number of boards, the NCD Commission, National Initiative of Service Excellence, Senior VP of the Barbados Chamber of Commerce, and currently the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, the Massy Foundation, and the Barbados Sugar Industry. So it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Neilands, who will provide some perspectives on private sector solutions to create demand for healthy eating. Mr. Neilands, please, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I'm muted. Good afternoon. I would like to start with a reference to the fact that I cleaned my teeth this morning with Colgate toothpaste. And I found to my chagrin that it is no longer white, it is now black. I carried on because of trust. Change is upon us. Can we trust the food we produce the same way? Can we trust each other to produce more of it? Can we work together? You're all familiar with this slide, I think. This speaks to the FAO's 4 pillars of food security: availability, access, utilization, and stability. I have my own 4 pillars, which match, I believe, the same circle of life: move, feed, breathe, and grow. So let's go to move. CARICOM governments have a goal of a 25% reduction in imported food by 2025. Do we have the capacity to produce what we reduce? Does the private sector have the appetite to help MSMEs to create solutions that result in healthy food products regionally and for export further afield? Who is the private sector? And now to access and feed. Supply does not guarantee food security. We need to reduce poverty by increasing incomes through helping communities to produce affordable, healthy food, which in turn allows for growth in the economy for all people. We need to create affordable food with a greater focus on market and price. Utilization, breathing. We need to do it the right way. We need common standards. We need front of package labeling. We need traceability. We need to reduce predial larceny. In short, we need to trust one another. Private sector, governments, NGOs, all. Stability, growth. The climate is changing. We need to be adaptable. We need technical solutions to ensure we can produce consistently, to innovate, to share what we have in a region. We need consistent intra-island shipping by air and by sea. We need to understand that coming out of COVID, things have been happening. A wonderful example of what works when we work together. Slow Foods Barbados is a non-for-profit, but has shown that chefs and farmers can unite to create a more sustainable food secure island while supporting our communities. They have created slow soups, a concept that recognized that during our lockdown, there were many people who lost their primary source of income and indeed are still recovering as we make our way out of the pandemic. Senior citizens, disabled persons, significant numbers of unemployed folks in need of a healthy, nutritious meal. In the first instance, farmers who were unable to sell their produce made significant donations, and chefs gave up their free time to work in borrowed spaces to create the soups. Joined by service organizations, volunteers, corporate sponsors, and private donors working together to fulfill a need. And you can see them on the slide, the number of people that were involved in this exercise. The project continues and has expanded to the point that farmers who have been suffering diminished sales with restaurants and hotels closed are now finding new markets, helping to build food sustainability. Could this charitable effort become a viable business, producing branded, affordable, and healthy fresh food, supporting farming communities and cooperatives, and helping farmers to invest in developing more arable land, deploying technology to build agro-processing initiatives, and further develop the stability we need in the region? FAO, IECA, and the University of the West Indies are all playing a role to open the doors. Helen's Daughters, the solution project promoting women's empowerment through social change, should, I suggest, create their own food brands, as well as others across the region who need to develop a market. These examples of innovative food solutions at community level deserve the attention of big private sector and other stakeholders to build distribution networks, develop retail spaces, and establish groundwork for greater research and development. This is how it works. Quite clearly, it's about everybody being involved from beginning to end. It's about a continuum. It's about community. It's about getting back to community. Solutions come in all shapes and sizes to design. So design strategist Anya Ayang-Chi and social entrepreneur Julie Avey from the Massy Group created Nudge Caribbean, a social enterprise connecting makers to the marketplace. Supported by Massy with initial expenditure of US $1 million, the program speaks to the need to support entrepreneurial energy, to stimulate the economy, create employment, and to nudge small and medium-sized business in the direction of success, both locally and internationally, working to build channels and market accessibility, working together. So, in conclusion, do we have the capacity to produce more healthy food in the Caribbean region? Can the private sector, from farmers to chefs and entrepreneurs to big business, work together and move, feed, breathe, grow by reacting to stimuli, the stimuli that COVID has brought on us? It's only a matter of trust. I believe our next speaker, Jody White, will answer these questions. Yes, we can.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Neilands, for sharing with us your particular perspectives and that of private initiatives surrounding the dimensions of food and nutrition security. I noted very importantly the framework of building back better after COVID, and most importantly, through partnerships and trust. And I also recognize very embedded in there the importance of e-technology in supporting these initiatives. We are thankful for you for sharing that with our attendees, and certainly look forward to further engagement. Next up, we have Mr. Jody White. And Jody White is an award-winning entrepreneur based out of Trinidad in the fitness and food industry. He is well known for developing creative, healthy twists on local meals. His most popular item is the production of pastas from regionally grown root crops. In particular, these products have become popular in overseas markets with customers that have specialty diets. Let me welcome Mr. White to share the experience of 10 years as a healthy food innovator. Mr. White, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My apologies. I had to switch to my cell phone because my internet connection just went down. So I'm going to tell you my story. I am 34 years old, and at the age of 20, I got a job as a pharmaceutical brand manager. And I managed many of the drugs that would have gone for NCDs, people who are hypertensive, diabetics. And there's one thing that I always found was that people would say, my sugar is high, I'm taking a tablet. You know, my pressure is high, I'm taking a tablet. And I never found that there was enough emphasis that was placed on preventative measures or controlling of the conditions that people had through healthier lifestyles. And that was just always lacking, and it was always in the back of my head. And, you know, I left that job and I opened a company that was called Slimdown 360. And yes, the focus was pretty much weight loss, but it was really weight loss through healthier means and proper scientific-based advice. So we would offer people the proper advice as it relates to nutrition, to exercise. But what we found was that people are busy. People don't have the time to cook the things that they should cook. So we actually would provide people the meals that they need: breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. And that became the company. We would give you everything coupled with the advice. If you had specific illnesses, we will work with your nutritionist or dietitian. We have people who assist you with exercise. And the company started and it did well. One thing I always found was that people would spend the first half of their lives sacrificing their health for their wealth, and the second half of their lives sacrificing their wealth for their health. People did not understand the relationship between their lifestyles and, in future, the diseases that they could be inflicted with. And even to this date, I realize that people don't know how slowly things pretty much creep up on you. So we work with people all the time. I've done many things. I've had multiple newspaper columns. I've hosted shows on TV for a couple of years, fitness related. And most recently, the thing that I do is that I create ingredients that go onto the shelves of supermarkets or into restaurants from local produce, but are designed to be a little healthier. So the one thing that I do that I'm most famous for, I would say, is that I make pasta. Or we make pasta that's made from sweet potato. And I presented this to the Minister of Agriculture about 4 or 5 years ago. And the thing is that they said nobody would ever eat a sweet potato unless it's boiled. There's a significant lack of expanding the ways that we could use local ingredients, change the way we do things. And it's a challenge that I still face now, and people that we deal with, we're accustomed eating potatoes as fries, baked or fried. They can't have the concept of saying, well, we could use local sweet potatoes. Or even if they want to use sweet potatoes, they're accustomed with the imported versions that are high in sugar. And some time ago, I dealt with the school's nutrition program. It's meals that are given by the government to school kids. And they said, you know what, we are going to stop giving kids soft drinks. And the parents were upset because they started giving kids water with their meals. And parents said, listen, you're giving our kids jail food. You're giving them water to drink with their food. They feel this is jail. So there is a lack of knowledge of people really understanding what is healthy food and what food could do for you and how food can make you feel. And it's through constant education that we have to show people. A couple of years ago, I personally financed a drive in Trinidad that didn't get very far because COVID actually hit. It was called Trinbago Goes on a Diet. And Trinbago Goes on a Diet, yes, it was weight loss again, but it was really just to build a hype. We wanted to give people free knowledge from doctors, from nutritionists and dietitians, from personal trainers, from physiotherapists, to change their lifestyle and to lose weight. And the goal was that people would go on, get a whole bunch of information, and it would be tied into local agriculture. So chefs and nutritionists would come together, they would make up meals, they would list recipes on there using local ingredients, and you could cook it at home and incorporate it into your lifestyle. And then if you want to get personalized attention, here is a list of nutritionists in Trinidad, go and talk to them and get your specific advice. And, you know, that was supposed to be people logging on onto this website and just putting in how much weight you lost. And in the end, I hoped that we would have seen maybe Trinidad or the region losing cumulatively £1 million. It was something that was hard to finance by myself, but it is something I would still like to do and get off the ground. It's a massive effort. But, you know, part of that was that we started filming a television show, and I started going out to people and actually filming people who are diabetic. And you would see people who would have lost their limbs, lost their eyesight. And it's just that when they were younger, they did not realize how dangerous these things could be and how preventable these things could be. And I would really think that as a Caribbean people, we are becoming more and more educated. You would find that more and more people have access to proper information, because there is still a lot of bad information. And it's battling that is a very, very hard thing. You know, people thinking that my life should change in a bottle or in a pill, and not thinking that, you know, your life could change pretty easily by just cutting back on your portions and cooking more vegetables. You don't have to eat broccoli. You could eat string beans. You could eat patroy. You could eat these things that you could grow in your garden. And we feel that local Caribbean foods are inferior. One of the things I do is that whenever we create something, it must be that I get the fresh produce from the farms and I could see the entire production process, and I present it as minimally processed to a consumer. And it's not always easily accepted, and it does truthfully cost more. And it does cost more because my scale is small. But as I grow, I continuously lower my prices. We continuously add in technology to reduce it. So we found that we've got the pastas that we do from cassava, which is regular pasta just made from cassava. We found that we brought it into about 40% higher than the price of regular pasta. But again, it's not that 40% sounds high, but a bag of regular pasta in Trinidad sells for $1 US. And a bag of our pasta might sell for $1.50 US. It's not that bad still. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of people could still afford it. So just to close, I just like to say that, I mean, us starting here is a very good start. And I really hope that the support is given to the people who are actively trying to make the change and make the difference, because I think that information is always good and it could have a very positive impact. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me.
Thank you so very much, Mr. White, for sharing with us a very innovative and I am entrepreneurial some feedback, in that perspective. We noted some preventative approaches that are not necessarily the norm when we treat our NCDs, in that regards versus, I guess, what we typically see, which is the treatment of symptoms. And we have to ask ourselves and consider the objective of our large pharma companies pertaining to these types of things, and what is our role as well as stakeholders in this entire process. I was happy to hear, of the need, obviously, for us to appreciate alternative ways to prepare our local foods, and the examples that even with your own entrepreneurial activities that you are displaying, public knowledge and attitudes regarding healthy foods seems to be a key limitation for us to engage a little better and ensure a little more adoption of some of these practices. And I noted something that as well, is analogous to our COVID situation. It's a problem as well for our general public to distill the amount of available information that is out there to ensure that they're getting good, accurate and reliable information that will help them make these kinds of decisions towards a healthier lifestyle. Participants, I want to again remind you, please keep sending us your questions and comments in the chat and in the Q&A feature. Very soon we will have a Q&A segment where we will address a lot of those, but please, you can continue to engage in discussions within the chat. So once again, let me thank Mr. White for this particular presentation. Now, our engagement continues, but with a very short and impactful visual element. The private sector can be a crucial ally in efforts to make agri-food systems more resilient and sustainable to ensure healthy diets for everyone. Transformative change requires everyone getting involved. The project initiated a social media campaign to highlight businesses in the region involved in such healthy innovations. Persons shared names, photos, and videos of healthy, delicious local foods made using diverse local vegetables, fruits, legumes, herbs, and unlimited use of healthy oils. We have put together a short video from posts on Instagram and Facebook, and we are happy to have you take a look. So please sit back and enjoy this video presentation. Wonderful. We know the region is blessed with wonderful, healthy food. If you want to see more, please check out the FFA as well as fan social media pages. And it is not too late to tell us about your favorite local healthy food places and products. Use the hashtags, hashtag gimme healthy, hashtag gimme local. We will place some of the key links in the chat so that you all can engage with us further on this wonderful initiative. We have a very important segment coming up, feedback from the youth. So we will turn to our 3 youth activists who will briefly share some thoughts, feedback, and takeaway messages and solutions as the data suggests that unhealthy food and nutrition habits disproportionately affects this particular group. So first, I would like to invite Mr. Jared Spencer. And Mr. Spencer is a graduate from the University of Nottingham with an integrated MSc in food science and nutrition. And he is the incoming technical systems coordinator at the Addo Food Group in the UK. His academic interests are the study of novel sustainable food systems and consumer behavior change within the food industry. Jared has been a youth advocate with the Healthy Caribbean Coalition since 2019 and is keen on creating an enabling environment which allows for the access of safe, nutritious, and affordable food for all. Mr. Spencer, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It is so great to see the public and private sector and civil society coming together to find meaningful solutions towards achieving a sustainable food system. It is also so encouraging to see these entities recognize for the first time that the goal of healthy, sustainable food cannot be achieved without the inclusion of a 4th group, the youth. I've been very lucky to have been surrounded by some of the most brilliant and innovative young minds that this region has ever seen. And oftentimes I ask them, what kind of Caribbean community do they want to inherit? And time again, at the top of their list is a Caribbean region that is not plagued by non-communicable diseases and that has access to safe, nutritious, and affordable food for all. So my message to the private sector and to the food manufacturing industry today is this. The next generation of consumers will be the most informed and the most ethical to date. We want to know what's in our food, where it was made, and most importantly, at what expense to our environment. Let this represent a unique opportunity for businesses in the Caribbean, not only to broaden the demographic of their products to include a growing cohort of health-conscious consumers, but an opportunity to implement bold and exciting ideas like circular economic models and corporate social responsibility schemes, all aimed at making food production as efficient and as equitable as possible. Food that is sustainable and food that is lucrative are not mutually exclusive, and the youth are committed to finding solutions to make food good for business and good for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Jared, for sharing with us your thoughts. I'd like to move on to Ms. Charity Dublin. And Ms. Dublin is an Antiguan-based nutritionist. She holds a BSc in Nutrition and Dietetics from the University of the Southern Caribbean and is pursuing an MSc in Public Health Nutrition from the University of Technology in Jamaica. She is certified in facilitating chronic disease self-management programs. She's certified in facilitating chronic disease self-management programs by Stanford University. She's currently employed as a community nutrition officer in the Ministry of Health, Wellness, and the Environment, and is passionate about the areas of infant and young child feeding and the prevention and management of non-communicable diseases. She creates nutrition and wellness content on social media under the brand Your Caribbean Nutritionist. So please, let us all welcome Ms. Dublin. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I am absolutely delighted to be one of the youth voices on this webinar. The presentations have been absolutely thought-provoking. One of the greatest takeaway points
It seems we are having a little bit of challenge, technical challenges with Ms. Dublin. So what we will do, we will move on to our next presenter and hopefully,
visuals from
oh, there she is. You just broke up a little bit. Yeah, it seems that we are having some technical.
life. It's crucial.
Ms. Dublin, we're having a little bit of technical challenge. So can you just start over for us again?
Can I suggest that she takes off the video?
Yes, and now thank you so very much. You could probably just take off your video and we will proceed.
Okay, you hearing me clearly now?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Yes, we are.
Fantastic. So from the top, I am absolutely delighted to be one of the youth voices on this webinar. The presentations have been thought-provoking. One of the greatest takeaway points for me is the need for partnerships with the private sector to help achieve a diet that is sustainable for humans and the planet. As a nutritionist working in the low-income communities, I am happy to see emphasis placed on ensuring that these healthy, sustainable foods are accessible and affordable to individuals from all walks of life. It's easy to say, eat healthy, but it's crucial that we put the systems in place to make this a reality for everyone. We want to create consumer demand for healthy local options while making those options the easier choice for all. It's also important to explore what food security and producing our own food looks like for countries and communities that have a limited agricultural capacity. I truly think that grassroots movements and youth engagement plays a critical role in promoting healthy, sustainable diets and lifestyles across the region. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for sharing with us your thoughts on the youth involvement in healthy diets within the region, Ms. Dublin. So lastly, we have Mr. Christopher Laurie. He's a Barbadian medical anthropologist supporting several organizations with health advocacy and research. His focus includes psychosocial determinants of health, issues of inequality and inequity, and the protection and empowerment of vulnerable communities. His main work is with the Heart and Stroke Foundation of Barbados, advocating for policies to address childhood obesity. In this role, Christopher is responsible for coordinating a youth advocate group to support this campaign, developing monitoring and evaluation procedures, as well as preparing data to enhance the campaign's advocacy and public health education. Christopher also supports the Improving Household Nutrition Security and Public Health in the CARICOM project in St. Kitts, facilitating research for a food and nutrition intervention. So let me kindly welcome Mr. Laurie. The floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Eudoxie, for that introduction. I would just like to initially mirror the sentiments of Charity and Jared, absolutely in pushing towards a more integrated and systematic approach towards health, food, nutrition, and equity. And I particularly stress on the latter point because we do understand that within our small economies, our relatively small economies, it is hard to obtain and maintain these healthy diets, which we keep striving for. But having said that, they're not unattainable. I was greatly encouraged by Mr. White and his interventions in Trinidad, and I would encourage all territories, all Caribbean territories and further to adopt such measures. In Barbados, we do have a coalition of civil society organizations who, since the beginning of 2019, have actively been in pursuit of addressing childhood obesity prevention. It's a large part of the work that I do at the Heart and Stroke Foundation, where we do have a number of youth advocates involved. And actually, Jared is one of these persons. And it is about growing a youth sensitization towards what health means, what nutrition means, and how to have active efforts and changes within your personal lifestyles. We also work with the Heart and Stroke Foundation across a number of schools in Barbados to make sure that the messaging is consistent and that our changes are realistic and manageable and attainable. As part of my intervention on the FAN project in St. Kitts, we were looking at a nutrition intervention, and one of the key findings which we did ascertain was that difference in eating patterns that Dr. Murphy would have alluded to previously. And I particularly want to highlight the aspect of the differences in how adults and kids eat, because adults will pick their food choices based off of cost and affordability and convenience, these grab and go measures, versus kids that tend to gravitate towards items which appeal to their taste and texture. So understanding that as part of our interventions, as part of these reformulations, changing in the consistency and quality of our foods, we also have to take on board. But we do have to have these conversations in conjunction with our kids, who we ultimately want to have these impacts on. So having that continued dialogue with youth and younger persons is essential and quintessential towards making these changes happen. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Christopher, for sharing those perspectives. And coming out of the three presenters and the feedback that they were able to provide us, we clearly recognize that the youth are asking for an integrated approach that involves all stakeholders, including some of those that are marginalized, to be part of our health initiatives and more so our healthy diet initiatives. And so we want to recognize that going forward. Participants, I know your knowledge palette has been whetted and you were fully engaged in active and very active on our chat and Q&A platforms. The upcoming segment is dedicated to addressing some of your comments, concerns, questions, perspectives on the topic, and to engage further discussions with our panelists. So we encourage you to continue to submit your questions and we will try to address as many as time allows. So if possible, I could probably ask our panelists to get ready. They could put on their videos and I will move into our Q&A segment in that regard. And a number of questions have been coming in. So I will try to touch on as many of them, as I said, as time allows. Very early on, we had a question that asks how are communities to be involved in raising awareness on sustainable nutrition. And we'll kind of ask our panelists to probably try to keep your responses concise so that we can get multiple persons speaking on a particular question and as well as much questions in as possible. So probably I'll phrase that question to Professor Samuels and to Dr. Murphy. Professor Samuels, you muted?
Yes, and I'm going to hand it straight over to Dr. Murphy.
No problem, Prof. Dr. Murphy.
There's so many ways that communities can be engaged and involved. And I think, the initiatives that are currently ongoing, things like backyard gardening, community interventions around gardening, and really things like farmers markets. I think Mr. Neilands mentioned a few different community interventions in his presentation. So I think there are lots of creative and out of the box things that we can consider as well. And the education can be part and parcel of those things. I think for me, farmers markets are one of the best ways to go, is when you have communities that are creating and producing, that they can actually sell and barter their produce close to home, and also use that as an opportunity to educate each other on what's good and what's healthy and nutritious.
Thanks so very much for that response. And we're going to continue with some of the other questions. A question came in asking, as an agro-processor, how do we gain access to this type of data? And how would that data help us innovate suitable food products for market? Probably a think tank, the participant was suggesting, where we can work together to shape future and healthy heritage of our Caribbean population. So I'm going to again throw that out to either one of our academics.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm really encouraged by this webinar because, and especially about what the Dean said in his introductory remarks about the importance of faculties of food and agriculture looking to nutrition. And I'm thinking that perhaps the Faculty of Food and Agriculture in Trinidad is ideally placed to do exactly what is being requested here. To be the transition point where, and to be a place where manufacturers can come and you can help them with reformulating or with rethinking what they're doing or with education and so on. So what we can start with, for example, is making the presentations that we did today available, as well as our own contacts. And, if a manufacturer somewhere wants to talk to Dr. Murphy or myself or whoever, just get in touch and we can take it from there.
Thank you so very much for that response. Wonderful. And it seems, Prof, you're giving the faculty some homework. So certainly we will, and I can guarantee you that, yes, we will move to ensure that we address that. Wonderful. There's a question here, we'll probably target it to our private stakeholders. Can there be higher taxes on the big fast food chains for the purpose of this type of research that is so vitally needed in providing data? So what are your thoughts on that? Probably Mr. Neilands, Mr. White. If not, we will also ask our academics as well.
You know what? The one thing is that the fast food chains do not necessarily want to develop anything that's local or anything that's healthy unless their arms are twisted. And we've had many interactions with a lot of the local ones. It always boils down to one thing, which is profit margin and nothing else. And it has to start, I think, with pressure from the governments. It may not even be taxations, it may just be open discussions and letting them know that the benefits of it. But something needs to be done as it relates to that, because it just has to be presented to the population in different ways that alternatives are there. And I think it will continue to grow. So that's something I think needs to happen.
Thanks for your perspective there. Mr. Neilands or any other panelists want to chime in there?
I would like to concur with what Jody just said. The biggest traffic jam on the road at the moment is to the fast food outlets. When we came out of COVID, you couldn't get along the street because of so many people queuing up to join the queue. But the fact is, there are many things we can do, and Jody has spoken to them. His cassava pasta product is a concrete example of what we could be doing. For example, one of the major food items in Barbados that we like to eat, or people like to eat as culturally, is macaroni pie. How good is that for you? Not very good, but if the macaroni was made with cassava, it would be an entirely different prospect. We could take foods that people like to eat that were generally unhealthy for you and make them healthier. Cassava in itself, I think, is a fundamental product that needs to be expanded. One of the biggest imports of food in the Caribbean is wheat flour to make bread. Why, oh, why are we not making more bread with cassava? We play around with it. There's not enough link between the farmer and the factory in terms of cooperation. There's not enough consolidation among farmers themselves to come together in cooperatives and say, in our community, we're good at cassava. We can help the local bakery to change things around. We can make it different. We've got to get into discussion, and the government have to be involved in that as well, and the private sector too. But it's about finding happy mediums. When you see the examples, Jody's product, there's another lady here in Barbados who's just been making product from breadfruit, all kinds of numbers. But her main market is likely to be international because it's been positioned as specialty food. You referred to it in Jody's case to some degree as well. But we need to take some of those specialty items and ingredients like cassava and make them into plain, ordinary food that can circle around the Caribbean as well. There's room for both, and we must support innovation. But we've got to get to the point that so much of our problem with health, in my estimation, is because we have people who are on the poverty line. And it's become more and more of that situation since COVID, since the economics of the world, everything about moving food around. It is a critical situation. If we can't find food for people in the local community that is easy to make, that is agro-processed, then we're hunting in the wrong market. And I think there's many more things we can do.
Thank you so very much for sharing your thoughts on that. And I think I am all resonate with your perspectives there. So moving on, and I think that question will be probably posed to Dr. Murphy and Professor Samuels. Parents like myself struggle to create exciting meals from local produce, pleasing to children who are influenced obviously by friends and who share fast food with them, and even the fast food ads that captivate them. Where can we find more recipes from local produce pleasing to children?
I'm going to pass that over to Professor Samuels.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Wonderful. Yes, Prof.
Well, first of all, I think that the internet is a great source if you're careful and you know where you're searching. There are lots of sites that talk about healthy food, healthy eating, you know, trying to, I remember even one site talked about, you know, using vegetables to make the gravy that you serve to the children. So if you're doing like stewed chicken, you put tomatoes and pumpkin and mash it out to make the gravy. So there are ways and there are things to do. But I think, you know, we have to be very realistic in terms of recognizing the impact of marketing by big food and big soda. If you look at the change in our eating habits over the past decades, and how it has been driven. And just to circle back to the question before that talked a little bit about taxation, I know that we all would like to think that education alone, or, you know, education it's important. We need to educate people. But as Maddie said, a lot of people already know what that they are eating unhealthy. I think that price and fiscal measures, personally, I think that's the way to go. If it were up to me, I would tax French fries 50%. Because, you know, you can just pay down on your heart attack. You're going to get the heart attack from the French fries in 10 years. So start saving the money from now. The government can put it down and start building on that money. There are some foods that are not only obesogenic, but are actually dangerous to your health. And I think those foods should be taxed heavily. That will change the construct of when you're going to buy, you know, convenient and cheap. Well, these unhealthy foods should not be cheap.
Thanks for that perspective as well, in how we may approach that, at least from a national or regional level. But as I think Mr. Neilands said, it really requires some conversation and trust among various stakeholders for us to address that. So there's a very interesting question with a very nice prelude from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, you know, where they're speaking to the fact that the society and economy now has been devastated by natural hazards, and the imports now are obviously what they have to depend on, you know, and the question really speaks to, and again, I think it's right there for your Professor Samuels and Dr. Murphy, you know, how do we begin to address, you know, the taste and nutrition transition? You know, what processes or approaches are there for us to try to facilitate that, particularly when sometimes we are have stress factors outside of our own doing, external factors. So if you could attend to that, it would be very nice. Thank you.
Yes, it is true. Whenever you have a disaster, be it hurricane, volcano, whatever, the fresh food goes away and the tin foods are what you have to eat. And that's reality. I think one of the things that we need to do in the Caribbean is have standards for graphic front of package labels. Because, give you an example, the other day I went into a supermarket to buy whole wheat crackers. Because of my background, I looked at the back to see trans fat labels. Most people wouldn't do that, but I looked. One of the crackers had 8% trans fat and the other one had 0. But the two of them are side by side on the counter, and the average person doesn't know which one is the more unhealthy one. So I think even in the circumstance where you have foods that are packaged and that you need to choose one of them because agriculture is down because of hurricane, we need labels to tell us which of those foods are healthier and which have on these labels that say if you're high in salt, high in trans fat. We shouldn't have trans fat in our food system at all. It has no nutritional value. We need to remove it.
Thank you so very much for that, and reminding our attendees of the importance of ensuring that we peruse our labels and the available information, they use it to the best, even within restricted circumstances. I have a question for Mr. Sorry, Dr. Murphy, you wanted to go ahead?
I think I did see this comment. I think it was about the barrel culture is what was the
That's right. Yes, yes. Please, feel free.
It's a really good example and point, because we do have a huge barrel culture in the Caribbean, and we get lots of our imported food through that way as well that come to families. It's an area I think that we need to do a little bit more research in. We haven't done a whole lot, and I think it's something that we need to learn more about what people get and what they get out of it as well. One of the other things I want to mention is that a big piece of this also relies on our regional trade or lack thereof. And I think, if we can find ways to increase our regional trade, that will help us in terms of probably cutting down on some of these issues when it comes to, the barrel culture, or even, the high imports of foods that sometimes people don't even really want to eat when it comes to disasters, because a lot of times, people mean well and they send foods and it's not even appropriate culturally sometimes in terms of what people are sending. So this actually came up in some of our interviews, especially with people within government and some of the food manufacturers and distributors, because they're saying when you have a natural disaster, they're looking at the ports, how are they going to get foods in, and then what kind of foods. So I think that trade piece is really important as well.
And thanks for bringing that up, Dr. Murphy. It has been something on CARICOM's list for a long time, and we really hope that we can get some progress in that area. It's truly an area that can seek to, as you rightfully said, revolutionize our ability to have regionally healthy foods throughout the Caribbean. Excellent contribution. Thank you so very much. So moving on, Mr. Neilands, there's a specific question here to you. Where it asks, do you think that there is a role for chefs to be involved in addressing NCDs? And if yes, how would that role unfold? And if no, why not?
Absolutely. And the example that I was using with Slow Foods in Barbados speaks exactly to that. The soups that they were producing were from vegetables, from different pieces of food that had been not being consumed, that were edible and healthy and nutritious. There are a number of innovative, clever chefs in the Caribbean, all over the place. There's one in Jamaica that Dr. Alafia can speak to, who's been working from New York to try to encourage the production of school foods in a community where agriculture speaks to specific products, be it sweet potato, be it yam, be it whatever in this region. Something else, peas and beans in another region, so that people can actually produce in their own locales. At the end of the day, yes, we must look at the importation of food and the taxes we pay, but we've got to make it cheaper to produce the local foods. And when I say the local foods, I mean agro-processed foods. I mean, taking a yam and a sweet potato and asking somebody to cut it anymore is, old dog. We've got to get out of that. We've got to make the stir fries pre-packaged, ready to go, properly labeled, everything under one roof. There's an example in Guyana where, because of the vastness of the country and Georgetown being quite away from rural farming communities, a number of people have come together in a group, built a commune of farmers who supply them with vegetables, which they cut and shape and pre-package and chill and sell to retail. So there are all kinds of ways. And I think the youth will lead us. I think there are a lot of innovative chefs who are supplying foods to hotels and restaurants. And coming out of COVID, a number have actually started up their own businesses, delivering food. One young lady I met at the Healthy Caribbean Coalition's recent program was a lady called Rennie Thomas from Grenada, and she produces granola from sweet potato, nutmeg, and chocolate. The chocolate factory is pulled together by a cooperative of farmers growing cocoa. It's all there for us to do. And this girl did her degree in public health and can see that the way forward is for people to work together. The youth will lead us. There's no question about it if we listen to them, you know?
Thanks for sharing that. And as you mentioned youth, I think I'm gonna pose the next question to our youth panelists and get their feedback, and all of you all can respond. What can be done to leverage interest of millennials in creating spin-off businesses in healthy local food products, services, and promotions in the region? So we want to get your feedback with regards to what can be done or what needs to be done to improve or leverage on that interest in these healthy food products and businesses. So any of you all, feel free to chime in and share your perspectives.
I think that's a great question. And I think that there isn't much that needs to be done to create that interest. I think that interest is already there. What needs to be done is the support and the access to resources and things like that. I think that my generation recognizes the importance of sustainable food systems, and we recognize that, you know, as it stands, 70% of our food is imported. The current model for food, I think that COVID has made it abundantly clear that it's simply quite literally not sustainable. So there is the interest there. As Mr. Nielsen was saying, we have some really exciting, innovative young people doing incredible things and incredible ideas, and all that they're asking for is an opportunity. So I think you need to listen to the youth and see how both the public sector, the research sector can support them and lift them up so that they can make their ideas realities.
Thank you so very, very much, Jared, for sharing your thoughts on that. Interesting thoughts that an enabling environment is very important in supporting youth engagement. Christopher, Charity, and any feedback from you all?
Hi, yes, thank you for that. So I would definitely agree with Jared, and I think that at the grassroots level, that kind of innovation is extremely important. I think that young people, especially, we operate in different spaces. So whereas understanding that traditional market of the quote-unquote older persons and where they operate and how they trade, etc., it's going to be different for us. So we tend to operate more in the digital space, on social media, and those spaces are extremely important. Of recent in Barbados, we actually had a huge traction whereby the youth advocates, which I saw a comment in the chat function, of what is the value of youth advocacy, we were actually able to leverage the Ministry of Education to have a pledge to address the school environment where they're actually going to implement a school nutrition policy coming into this new academic year and onwards. And we're actively working with them towards how that is shaped. So I think that the more and more you can have those kinds of interventions and collaborations, it has to be a participatory approach, whereby policymakers understand that the youth are ultimately who are going to be affected by these changes. And the more that they are able to shape them, the better. And it goes back to Professor Samuel's point, whereby it has to be these overarching policy decisions, because if you are trying to make a healthy change in your personal life within an environment that does not support that, can you facilitate, can you make that choice? The answer is simply no. So the more that we are able to shape the environment with the guidance from the technocrats, but you have to have the input of the youth so that they have the support and they actively buy into what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you so very much, and well said and noted. Ms. Dublin, anything from you? Okay, then we will move on, and participants, we know that we are at already 3:30, and it definitely seems that our webinar is one that was well received with and very important to you all with regards to the level of interaction. We will entertain, at least in this live version, one last question. Afterwards, we will proceed to our wrap up. And I want to direct this particular question to Mr. White. And the question asks, or it says, manufacturers may say that it is cheaper to import goods and products than to buy local, such as our cassava flour. What strategies can we implement to assist with a cheap, sustainable, and healthy diets to consumers? So probably you could further elaborate on your own experience. Mr. White?
So, a big problem I have in Trinidad is that cassava flour has a 12.5% VAT on it, and regular flour does not. And while we have appealed to the Ministry of Agriculture saying, listen, at least put us on a level playing field to that extent, it's viewed as a luxury item. So they do not want to remove the VAT from it. Cassava flour in this part of the world is about 3 times more expensive as cassava flour from Asia. And even Africa, it's 20 times cheaper than what we get here. Now, scale is one big thing that we could utilize. 2, I constantly have to give people new recipes on how to use it. Because of course, the cooking techniques are a bit different. People try to use cassava flour like they would use wheat flour and get poor results. So we constantly have to teach people how to go ahead and use it and to expect that it is not going to taste and feel the same way as wheat flour would. The 2 commodities are totally different. If you grow up eating a cassava pancake, you would say that wheat-based pancakes taste weird. So it's really getting people to understand that, hey, this is different. I accept it will be different and it's better for me. And I am willing to give up that little bit of what I would prefer for something that is healthier. And us as producers in turn would be able to scale up and get costs down to consumers.
Well, so, thanks so very much for sharing that. And what I gathered from that was the key need to have the entire food system value chain embedded in our approach. I noted the importance of having different recipes, and I saw how that linked with the importance of chefs, being integrated there, the importance of farmers and ensuring productivity is high, and it really speaks that there's still a lot that we need to do. And we're very thankful for you for sharing those perspectives. Participants, at this time, it is my pleasure to invite our UWI STA Faculty of Food and Agriculture Webinar Committee Chairperson, Dr. Lystra Fletcher-Paul, to provide a session wrap-up and a summary of recommendations. Dr. Fletcher-Paul, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eudoxie, and good afternoon, everybody. And I have to say, this has been a very engaging webinar. I have really thoroughly enjoyed it, especially because of the contribution and looking on at the what I'm seeing in the question and answer. It's so good to see the youth so involved. So without further ado, the main recommendations coming out of today's webinar, I have sort of some broad headlines and key, what I call notes that spoke to me coming out of the recommendations. One was partnerships to help to encourage healthy, accessible, affordable food. Partnerships with the private sector, and not just any private sector, but with friendly private sector, people who are already making money by growing and producing and selling healthy, nutritious food. Partnerships with the youth, because they are the voice of the future. In fact, at the national dialogue that was held for the food systems, preparing Trinidad and Tobago's paper for the food systems summit, one of the key recommendations was that the youth, the demand for healthy, nutritious food must come from the youth. It must be led by the youth because they are the future of the Caribbean. So if we want this to be sustainable, we have to get them on board. So partnership with the youth. Another key, 2 other key words that stuck out to me, what I call keywords, information and education. information for the consumers in terms of warning labels and nutrition labels. Professor Samuels talked about the importance of having the front of product labels so that you can see immediately, well, this particular food item has what is good for you and what is not good for you. The use information in terms of what constitutes healthy food, what constitutes a healthy plate. She spoke about the plate having one half with salad, another quarter with the meat, and another quarter with your vegetables. Education at all levels, where the messages must be consistent, constant, and targeted. In other words, when Maddie made her presentation, she was saying, well, yes, they tell you about this in the school feeding program or in school about eating healthily, but when you go home, you don't get healthy food. Or when you sit at the table, people don't eat healthily. Or when you get bigger, or people say, well, the kids say, well, you know, that they see eating healthy as a punishment because it was not brought up. The whole idea of eating food was seen as something that is not, it is being imposed on them. So the education is a very important part of that whole recommendation of how we present the messaging, and it must be targeted. Targeted not only at different audiences, it's not a general thing. I remember the Secretary General of CARICOM Secretariat used to say, sent doesn't necessarily mean received. Because you send out these broad messages doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of people or everybody is going to get it. So it must be targeted, special messages targeted to the youth, special messages to the school feeding program, special messages to medical doctors. I know one of my doctors, my cardiologist, when I said to him, listen, when he said to me, you know, your cholesterol is a bit high. And I said, well, is there any way I could change it with diet? He said, no. You have to take this medicine, otherwise you will die of a heart attack. So he's telling me right away, the first point of defense is go to the medicine. So we have to educate our medical doctors. I know they're in the process. That's why it's called medicine, because they want to sell medicine. They're linked with the big pharma and so on. But we need to get them on board to say, you need to say, let us eat properly as well. So targeted messages to our chefs to get them involved in the preparation of food. Targeted messages to the grassroots. The charity made that point, the involvement of grassroots, because sometimes the messaging is coming from youth who are highly educated, who went to all these top universities, and that turns off a certain demographic of people. So we must be able to target to the people that we want to accept the message. We must create the demand, and it must be led by youth. And we must say that it is also preventive. The other thing about education is that there's also need for communication. Communication suggests that the dialogue is both ways. We must not only send the message, but we must also receive the message. What is the private sector saying? Why they are not getting involved? What is the fast food group saying? Why they are not getting involved? We must listen so that we can change the narrative and see how we can adapt and adopt to understand their needs, their challenges, and how we can address the challenges. So the communication must be both ways, and there must be innovative channels of communication. We spoke about the need for farmers markets and backyard gardens and community gardens that are creative and new, so that the private sector is also getting involved and using the local ingredients. We spoke about the importance of the Faculty of Agriculture and our research institutions in terms of innovation, another key word that came up. Innovation in terms of making specialty items to substitute for what is currently being used. I remember, for example, when I was working in Guyana, the Carnegie School of Home Economics had a training session for people who managed tuck shops in the secondary schools of Guyana, teaching them new ways of substituting imported foods for local foods without changing the taste. And they tested it with the use of students. So the Faculty of Agriculture is an important means of that transition, so that we can get them involved and they become the go-to place for manufacturers, for the private sector, for individuals to come for information on this new nutrition, because we're going to be pushing more the nutritional aspect, the food aspect. Innovation in terms of prepackaged, processed, and local foods, new ways of processing the food. And then there are the policies in terms of that governments can do. So there's the price and fiscal measures. Alafia talked about taxing and the imported unhealthy foods and removal of VAT. Mr. White talked about the need for removal of VAT, for example, on the cassava flour. So, and then there's the need for more regional trade in nutrition sensitive foods. We spoke about the barrel culture, but I remember growing up, we used to get barrels from Grenada and St. Vincent with good food, blue food, cassava, dasheen, sweet potato, all the healthy, nutritious food that is very good for us. So let's encourage the regional barrel food that is healthy and nutritious, and providing the enabling environment. The next key point here, an enabling environment that supports access to information, that provides incentives, especially for the young people to get involved in the processing of food, the shifting to this culture of new food. And community. Mr. Neilands talked about the importance of building that community where you have the private sector involved in building trust, because it's only by the dialogue and the community working together that we understand one another and we build that trust that is required to make the shift that we are seeking. So those are the key recommendations coming out of the discussions. There may have been more, and I'm sorry for those. Time has sort of, I know we are limited for time, but these are the key recommendations that I have so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher-Paul, for sharing with us some key recommendations from this particular webinar. And I would like to concur that this was certainly one of the most engaging webinars that I have been part of. And it clearly reflects the importance of this topic and certainly the need for a follow-up. So I'm putting that out there to our host institutions. Firstly, let me thank you, the viewers, participants, attendees, for staying the course. We have had a very insightful and informative session on healthy diets in a regional context, utilizing local foods. The scope and diversity of our discussions surely will allow us to build on our foundation and propel us to explore very specific opportunities as articulated by Dr. Fletcher-Paul. I ask that you continue to engage not only with the STA FFA of UE, but also with FAN project to follow up on any of the presentations and specific options presented. Additionally, I would like to request the host institution to please follow up on any unanswered questions, as you know our time was limited, and to please follow up through their platforms to provide responses to those questions. I wish to express deepest thanks to the organizers, particularly the staff involved in the preparation and delivery of this particular webinar, all the presenters, and importantly, our participants. It was a pleasure to take you through this session, and I look forward to your continued support as we transition to healthy diets. I ask everyone to please remain safe, take care, and goodbye.